Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Tony. I'm the co-founder of ICOindex, and welcome everyone who is watching, and thank you for joining in to this video. Our goal at ICOindex is to give people better understanding of blockchain startups, and we are trying to show people how blockchain technology can actually be applied for real businesses. Today, we invited Jonathan Smith, who is the co-founder of Civic, because we at ICOindex, we consider Civic as one of the most interesting startups in the blockchain space. And Jonathan is the co-founder and CTO of Civic. So today we'll be talking more about their startup and blockchain technology in general. So I would like to welcome Jonathan. Thank you so much for joining us today. And it's really great to have you here. And at first, I would like to just ask you if you could introduce yourself and tell us a bit about your role at Civic.
Sure, thanks for having me here. So I'm the CTO and co-founder of Civic, and I come from a deep banking tech background. So I guess that's fundamentally where my interest started in the space, especially as those kinds of institutions are squarely in the crosshairs of blockchain technology.
Okay, that's really cool. So I think actually most of our viewers, they will know what Civic ecosystem is all about. Civic had ICO, I think about 1 year ago. But for those that don't know the project yet, could you just explain in few sentences what Civic is about and why it was actually created?
Sure. So I'll start with the last question. I think so. So why we were created is right at the beginning. We were actually initially looking for a solution to digitize democracy. We saw blockchain and Bitcoin as potentially a solution there. So, and by that I mean being able to vote, ideally in government elections on the blockchain. And as we dug deeper into that underlying problem and why you can't do that, we saw that identity is really the big issue there. Is, how do you identify who's casting a vote? Make sure that people cast only people who are allowed to cast a vote should be able to, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's when we got into identity and started seeing actually how fundamentally broken identity systems were across all businesses and verticals. And then also sort of a light bulb moment of how core identity is to our society and how we function. Last year, the World Bank as well released figures showing that approximately 1.1 billion people on the planet do not have any way to prove their identity. And that's fundamental to getting access to services, basic services, buying property, starting a business, etc. So solving identity and the underlying problems that exist today is pretty key to our society as a whole. And I think that's really how we, why we got into identity. To talk a little bit more about what we're doing, we're building a digital identity solution that you can use on your device that is much more secure and much more trustworthy than any form of identity used today. And the addition of blockchain really allows a uniform solution that gives this kind of a digital identity global scale, a global level of trust. No one entity can shut it down. And such a fundamental solution that underlies everything that we do as human beings. It really gives us the ability to use that solution in our daily lives moving forward in a way that we've never envisioned before. Opens up new use cases and fundamentally will change the way we live.
So are you actually planning in the future to go to the original idea of putting democracy on blockchain, or is this something that
Absolutely. I mean, I think we can think of that either directly we will impact that, or there will be second-layer solutions built on top. For example, one of our partners, Votum, is looking into that aggressively already, and they have a solution, and we're working closely with them. So whether it's us that ultimately does that, or it's partners like Votum, it's going to happen. There's a lot of legislative hurdles to overcome as well. Perhaps the voting solutions will start more in corporate boardrooms for proxy voting and things like that. But at the end of the day, that's an ultimate outcome that we really hope to see in the world.
Yeah, I hope as well this will be the future of voting systems. So when did you actually get first the idea to create Civic? When was the milestone?
So it was really sort of early to mid 2015. Started having conversations with my co-founder, Vinny Lingham, who most people in the blockchain space will know very well, really about ways that we could use this amazing technology to change the world. And that's where the obvious non-currency use case came up as well, voting. I mean, we come from a developing country, both myself and Vinny from South Africa. We've seen the problems with voting, with corruption, etc. In those kinds of countries. And even in countries like the US, there's amazing opportunities to improve the current systems and encourage greater voter participation. So really that's, I think, where the beginning was, 2015, mid 2015.
Yeah, I see it as this like industry. I see it as one of the most interesting industries that can be vastly like improved by blockchain technology. Actually, a lot of startups, they are trying to use blockchain technology for use cases that, from my point of view, are not where blockchain is not that much needed. So my question is like, I know that Civic needs blockchain technology to be as successful. So could you explain more in details, like how does actually Civic utilize blockchain technology and how is it better than the existing solutions?
So I think an easy comparison for people that people can relate to is things like logging onto a website using Facebook, for example. That situation really, you are telling Facebook what you are doing, which site you are going to. Facebook is deciding how that interaction works. And I'm not calling out Facebook in a negative way here. I'm just really stating as an obvious that people probably use in their daily lives. So that sharing of information to get access to a service is not particularly private, not necessarily secure. And you don't, and even for websites who get this data, they're not guaranteed of the authenticity of the data that they're getting either. So blockchain technology kind of in a way can replace that third party, being Facebook or any other party, Google, whoever they use. And what that effectively means is that when I hand over my data to you, you have the ability to look at it, look at the blockchain and see, okay, do I ultimately own the private keys that show that I own this identity? Is this identity, this piece of information I'm giving you, still valid? And if so, that gives me a private way of communicating both with the party receiving the transaction, allowing that party to privately validate the information that they're getting. And what it really allows as well is I can hand over now any information that's required, from allowing complete anonymity, if that's what the site or service allows, where I can just say, don't worry, I'm fully verified to a level of authenticity that you require. But at the same time, I don't need to give you any information to prove that. So that's quite a stark change, because a lot of services, especially in the financial services space, require you to give over information that they don't actually need in perpetuity, but they need it to verify who you are. Things like your social security number in the US. Most services don't actually need that for any real reason other than to then communicate with background services to check who you are. So this allows the ability to verify your identity, but in a completely private and secure manner that is also revocable. And the blockchain allows all of these functions to happen. And a fundamental piece to that as well is at scale. There's no way that that foreign governments are going to trust each other with such a valuable service. Imagine a scenario where you wanted a single solution where perhaps the Chinese government and the US government were able to issue passports and operate in the same framework. There's no way that they would give each other the power to potentially turn off the service that allowed their citizens to use their identity. And there's also no way that they would allow a service where this private information could be shared. So something like blockchain, which allows the level of privacy and is completely outside of government control, is really important to scaling to a scalable solution that is truly global.
Mm-hmm. If I would come back to the Facebook login, from my point of view, like most people are using the Facebook login because it's so super easy to use. It's just like one click away. So it's actually like Civic going to be used in this way as well, that people can just have their Civic installed and then they can just click on the website, and that's how they can actually register and log in most of these websites?
Yeah, there are some websites that have adopted WikiHow, probably the most prominent website that's adopted that our technology for that. Obviously, a lot of that has to do with adoption and scale. Every website will implement it if everybody on Earth uses it. So we've got to get to a certain point where, well, not necessarily every person on Earth, but where there's enough adoption to make it viable for that simple use case to be more widespread. And we're working very hard to make sure that there are viable solutions, viable use cases out there where people have a good reason to adopt a digital identity. It's very fundamental to what we're doing and how we're approaching this problem.
We've seen a very interesting use case that was used in Consensus in New York, where you used beer vending machines and you were checking the age of the people that are buying the beer. So are you actually planning to produce more of these vending machines?
So we won't be producing vending machines as such. We did that in partnership with I think they are the largest brewing company in the world, AB InBev, and so we're going to work with them and with companies like that in similar use cases that really shows how masses, once you have mass adoption of a digital identity solution like this, the new use cases that can come about. So while it seems pretty easy and it seems like, yeah, okay, it's a beer vending machine, in reality, that the ability to prove your identity to a vending machine has not been possible in the past for many reasons. Sure, you could always have had an identity scanner where you scan the driver's license and go off and start doing analytics and perhaps have a video camera. But when you think about the costs of that and rolling that out at scale, it's prohibitive. Your beer would end up costing you $10 for a beer, and maybe even more. And so in reality, the concept of a reusable identity that's verifiable in real time really enables many use cases. And this is just an easy example that hopefully will scale very naturally.
I definitely agree with this, because me personally, I participate in a lot of ICOs. Quite often I'm quite obsessed, I'm not happy that I have to verify my identity every time when I want to participate in a new ICO. So I'm still wondering, why is it that most of the ICOs, they still don't use Civic, they use other KYC and AML services? So could you walk us through how can actually ICOs use Civic in a way that their investors can reuse their KYC and AML, their kind of identity?
Yeah, sure. I mean, there are lots of ICOs that are starting to use us. And we're working with ICO platforms as well. Token Market is a great example of a partner in the space. And I mean, we worked with them on our ICO as well. And we continue to work with them for future ICOs and token sales that they are supporting. And it's really simple to implement our software. You can just go to Civic and see exactly how to implement the software directly. And what you end up with is effectively a button on your site that will display a QR code to a user that they can scan. The Civic app will then take you through an identity verification process if this is your first time being verified on the Civic network. And once you've been verified once, that's it, you're done. And then you can reuse that anywhere else you go that supports the Civic identity. And so it's really as simple as that. It's very easy to get up and running. And the user at the end of the process, or when the identity is requested, they get a view of what data the site is requiring and can decide to authorize sharing with that data or not. And as soon as they do that, then they would get access to the services that site, or whether it's for ICOs or any other site, requires.
So when I, for example, do this KYC check in Civics, what, for example, the ICO project, what information am I sharing with them?
So normally we find that the projects want you to share all your data, well, not all your data, but copies of driver's license or passports, etc., with them. They need this. They feel they need this for many reasons, whether it's even for future audit purposes. you have that option to not share it, and obviously then they won't give you access to their service, and that's really the truth of it. Services you want access to decide if they want to, you're setting up a relationship with them. So that's what we see normally. That's what most ICOs want, or token sales want, is a copy of the documentation that was used to verify the user, and they store that however they do for however long they feel it's required.
Okay. I feel like it has been 1 year since the Civic ICO, if I'm not mistaken. What was the exact date last year? If you can.
Well, it was, I think we closed the sale towards the end of, I want to say the end of June. It was end of May, end of June.
Yeah.
Last year.
So I have a question regarding the token behavior model, because I'm seeing a lot of blockchain projects, or a lot of startups that are having their own ICO, and they kind of don't have really clear token behavior model, or their kind of token economy that is not functioning in a way that it should. So I was actually reading the Civic token model, or the behavior model, and I found it really interesting. So I would like to tell us a bit more about how does the token model work, and what is the kind of use case or the utility of Civic token on the platform.
Sure. So effectively what we're creating is a marketplace. And what that allows is, it allows identity validators, we call them, on the one side, to effectively sell identity verification services, if they so choose, to entities that require them. So for example, if I'm a token sale platform and I want to verify the identity of a user, I may trust, say, a bank, I may trust certain identity verification platforms. And as long as a user comes to me with an identity verified by one of those players, I will accept that identity. And of course, the players on the other side need to get compensated for these services. They're not cheap. If you look at a bank, they pay maybe $20, $30 on average for every user that they have had to verify and keep on going in their system. So they don't want to just allow people to use those identities for free. So they will want to be compensated for those services. And so every time a user now arrives with an identity that's been validated, we need a mechanism by where we can compensate those players. What this allows is also the concept of reusable identity. So you've been verified once, and now you can use the identity many times. And what that allows is, now on a per use basis, you can dramatically lower the cost of verification of a user, which also opens up the door to many, many use cases, vending machine being one example. And so, but in order for this to truly work and to be globally scalable, it also has to be self-sustainable and self-governing. So we have to make sure that that this ecosystem, you're going to have people who want to commit fraud in any marketplace, in any ecosystem, whether it be Amazon or eBay. And so there have to be mechanisms in place to help deter such behavior at any sort of scale. And so the game theory we use in our white paper is the beginnings of trying to make that a reality. So that when you have identity verifiers, if they are putting fake identities into the network, that would be very quickly established, and they will be financially and heavily penalized for that kind of behavior, and will not really be able to participate for very long. And on the other side, those that help weed out those actors need to be also rewarded for such behavior. And at the same time, there needs to be incentive mechanisms for the users to use such a network. So what you really have to do when you create these ecosystems is think of all the players involved, and how do you incentivize them to participate and participate actively. And I think that's key to building any true decentralized marketplace or token-based ecosystem, if it's going to be truly standalone. And so, I think we're going to see a lot more of these types of things coming out of the woodwork, but this is really early days. Mm-hmm. But I think it's critical to scaling and growing these new ecosystems.
I think this is a great piece of advice for a lot of other projects that are struggling and they don't know how to kind of design their token mechanism. Is there something else that you could actually recommend to other startups and other founders that in any way, like when they're building their own startup, their own blockchain project? Is there anything else that you could recommend them as well?
I think you've really got to understand why you need a token or blockchain. I mean, blockchain, I truly encourage people to try blockchain in every aspect. There's a lot of naysayers that say, oh, blockchain is not a good fit for everything. And they will be right in the long term. There will be good examples of that, but that shouldn't stop us trying. And what I love about this space is these projects, there's so many of these projects, and they're going to prove out so many new use cases that we can't even dream of yet. So I love that attempt to use blockchain, but we mustn't assume, a token for the sake of a token is not necessarily a good idea. And you have to understand what is the model you're trying to create, what is the ecosystem you're trying to create, what is the economy, this brand new economy that you're building, what is it for, and why does my token add real value to all players in that system? And that's something that is not an easy problem to think through. So yeah, it's hard, but it's exciting, and I think I look forward to seeing all the cool projects that come out all the time. It's very interesting, but the truth is 95% of these projects will probably fail, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. The failure rate in the normal startups is also very high, but to the ability to do these projects is going to be key to blockchain's future.
Yeah, I agree that it's very hard to actually make a successful blockchain project. And so is there anything else that you would tell the ICO projects that they should avoid in order not to be in the 99% of projects that fail?
I think we're too early to really know. I think at the end of the day, you're running a business that you're trying to create real value for your users, and you've got to hold the highest level of ethics and integrity when you're building your business. This is and execution is key. Like in any startup, execution is what's going to be the make or break, and your teams that can execute. It doesn't matter how good the idea is, if you can't bring it to the market, you can't find product market fit. Like any startup, you will have the same problems. I don't think it's unique to blockchain companies.
And if you could relate to Civic, could you tell us any the biggest mistake that you have made while working on the project or in the ICO or after that? Do you remember anything?
I don't think I can point to specific mistakes. I think, like I said, it's like any startup, it runs the same risks and the same challenges in execution and finding product market fits. And token sales themselves are very complicated processes. They take months to prepare for. We work with some of the best in the industry, the best, great lawyers, great platforms. There's my co-founder Vinny. He wrote a great article, A Brief Introduction to Token Sales, that you can find, I think, on Medium. And there's a lot of details in there around leadership and how to execute a great sale. The landscape has changed dramatically since we did ours, so I don't want to give any advice around how somebody should run a token sale or how anyone should run that type of business. But do your homework, and yeah, it's difficult though. Don't for 1 minute think that this is easy. But startups aren't, but they're worth the blood, sweat, and tears.
Yeah, understood. So how do you see personally the future of Civic?
I think it's very bright. I think the space is very bright as well. The entire identity verification industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry. McKinsey recently, I think, released a report saying that it will grow to something like $20 billion by 2022. And the inherent benefits that the blockchain give, and the ability and the new use cases that will come, I think any estimates of what the blockchain identity ecosystem looks like are grossly underestimated, because we do not even know the new use cases that are going to come out when you have a ubiquitous blockchain identity solution. I think for a lot of blockchain projects, identity is key to the success of those projects. Because if you think about it, you've got to bridge the real world and the blockchain world at some point. If you're going to have a mortgage or title deeds on the blockchain for your house, there's got to be someone who owns that, and that requires an identity. And there are lots of projects that will have, whether it's voting on the blockchain, etc. So we're so early on, but I think the future, and you see the amount of press coverage these days around blockchain identity, it's going to be huge.
Okay. Is there anything else for that you would like to say as a final note, or something that you would like to share with the viewers?
I think we don't. The truth is, we're in a new. This is a completely new paradigm that we're beginning to see with blockchain technologies, and I think that this new way of working blockchain is going to be at the core of how we live our lives. We don't know yet how things will play out, but we do know that these technologies are not going anywhere. They do have the potential to change every aspect of our lives, and not just how we pay for things, but also how we earn money and how we interact with the digital world at large in the future. In the end, your digital identity is the fundamental building block to how you will be accessing this new world.
Yeah, great thoughts at the end. Thank you so much, Jonathan. It was great talking to you. It was really
Thank you very much for having me. It was great talking to you as well.
Yeah, thanks a lot. So thank you all the viewers for tuning in, and we'll be back to you soon in our next interview.